My name is Sylvia Thornton, and at 72 years old, I thought I'd seen everything life could throw at me. The years had taught me to wear my scars with dignity, and I'd come to accept that memories, both sweet and bitter, shape who we are. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened during my granddaughter Abigail's wedding, an occasion that should have been filled only with joy and celebration. It was a perfect spring afternoon. The country club garden was decorated with white and gold flowers that shimmered under the May sun. Abigail, my beloved granddaughter, glowed in her wedding dress as she danced with her new husband. I watched from my table with the pride only grandmothers can truly understand, when a waiter approached discreetly. "Mrs. Thornton, a gentleman left this for you," he said, handing me a cream-colored envelope. He insisted it was urgent. I took the envelope curiously. It had no return address, just my name written in handwriting that seemed strangely familiar. I decided to open it privately, and made my way to a quiet corner of the garden, away from the music and laughter. My hands trembled slightly as I tore the paper. Inside was a handwritten letter, and a small golden key. The moment I saw the handwriting, the world around me seemed to freeze. It was impossible. Absolutely impossible. "My dearest Sylvia, if you're reading this, it means Thomas has kept his promise. I'm not dead. The boating accident was staged. I've been in hiding these past 15 years for reasons I can't explain in this letter. I'm in grave danger, and you might be too. Don't trust your daughters-in-law. They know more than they appear to. The key opens a secret compartment in my old desk. There you'll find the truth. With all my love, Edward." The paper slipped through my fingers as my heart pounded violently against my chest. Edward, my ex-husband, the man everyone believed had died in a boating accident 15 years ago. Alive? It was like being visited by a ghost. I'd attended his funeral, cried in front of his empty casket because they never found his body in the lake. I quickly tucked the letter into my purse when I saw Victoria, my son Nathan's wife, approaching with a smile that now seemed different to me, almost calculating. "Sylvia, is everything all right? You look like you've seen a ghost," she remarked as she placed her hand on my shoulder. "I'm fine, dear," I lied, just a bit emotional about the wedding. Her eyes briefly glanced at my purse before meeting mine again. "You should sit down. At your age, it's not good to get too worked up." At my age. Those 3 words I'd been hearing too often lately from my daughters-in-law, and even my own sons. "Don't worry about me. Go enjoy the party," I replied with a forced smile. As I watched her walk away, I noticed how she exchanged a look with Audrey, my other daughter-in-law. Was I being paranoid, or was there something suspicious about that gesture? Edward's words echoed in my mind. Don't trust your daughters-in-law. The rest of the wedding passed as if I were in a bubble, smiling mechanically, answering questions without really hearing them. My mind was fixated on that letter, that key, and the desk that had belonged to Edward, now stored in the attic of my house. What secrets did it hold? And why, after 15 years of silence, had Edward decided to contact me now? Most disturbing of all, what did my daughters-in-law have to do with any of this? That night, as everyone celebrated, I knew my life had just changed forever. The truth, whatever it might be, awaited me in that old mahogany desk. And something told me I wouldn't like what I was about to discover. I was born in a small lakeside town called Mapleton, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a hardware store owner who struggled to make ends meet. My childhood was spent between books and helping in the store, learning early on that life doesn't hand out gifts. By 16, I was working afternoons at the local diner to help support my family. It was at that diner where I met Edward Thornton. He was 22 and had just returned from studying business at the state university. The youngest son of Mapleton's wealthiest family, he was handsome with amber-colored eyes that seemed to see straight into my soul. Against all expectations and his family's objections, we fell in love. "You're smarter than all those debutantes my parents parade in front of me," he told me one evening, as he helped me wipe down tables after closing. I don't care that you don't have money or a college education. I see something in you, Sylvia. Something special. We married when I turned 19. In a simple ceremony his family barely acknowledged. His parents never approved of their son marrying a waitress. But Edward didn't care. He had always been different, always swimming against the current. With loans and hard work, Edward started a small investment firm that grew rapidly. We had 2 sons, Nathan, now 48, and Daniel, 45. I raised them while Edward traveled constantly for business, building a financial empire that allowed us to live with comforts I had never imagined possible. But money changed Edward. Over the years, he became more reserved, more obsessed with his business ventures. Arguments began, absences grew longer, and finally, when our sons were adults, we separated. It wasn't a bitter divorce, but rather a quiet acknowledgement that we were no longer the same young people who had fallen in love beside the lake. Despite the separation, Edward remained present in our sons' lives and ensured I had a beautiful home and financial stability. "You've earned it," he told me. "You stood by me when I had nothing." And then one sunny September day, 15 years ago, I received the phone call that would change our lives. Edward's boat had disappeared during a storm on Lake Michigan. Search teams looked for days, but found only pieces of the vessel. Edward was declared dead due to a boating accident. The shock was devastating for all of us. Despite our problems, I still cared deeply for him. Our sons were destroyed, especially Nathan, who had always been closer to his father. During the funeral, with an empty casket symbolizing the body the lake never returned, I vowed to keep his memory alive for our children and grandchildren. Edward left a surprisingly simple will. The house was left to me, along with a modest but sufficient lifetime pension. The rest of his fortune was divided between Nathan and Daniel, who took control of the companies. There was also a trust fund for Abigail, our only grandchild at that time, daughter of Nathan and Victoria. And so we had lived these past 15 years, building new routines without Edward, accepting his absence as one accepts the tides. Inevitable and part of the natural order of things. Until now. Until this letter, that threatened to destroy the fragile peace we had constructed. The morning after Abigail's wedding, I returned to my house determined to find answers. I live alone in the lakefront property that Edward and I once shared. A grand colonial revival home that he purchased when his business began to prosper. My sons constantly insist I should sell it. "It's too big for you, Mom," Nathan says whenever he visits. "You could move to a smaller apartment, easier to maintain. Or better yet," Victoria, his wife, always adds, "there are beautiful senior living communities near our house. You'd have company and medical care." Audrey, Daniel's wife, is more direct. "This house is worth a fortune, Sylvia. The property alone could sell for millions. It's absurd for you to live here by yourself." I've always resisted. This house holds my memories, both good and bad. Here I raised my sons. Here my garden flourished. Here I aged with dignity. I always thought it was just concern that motivated their insistence. But now, Edward's words planted doubts in my mind. I climbed to the attic with cautious steps, as if fearing to awaken ghosts from the past. Edward's desk remained covered with a sheet, untouched since I decided to store it there after his presumed death. It was a beautiful piece of carved mahogany, with countless drawers and compartments that he used to organize his life. I removed the sheet with a decisive motion, raising a cloud of dust that danced in the sunbeams coming through the small window. I ran my fingers over the polished wood, remembering how Edward used to sit here for hours, working on his projects, making calculations, writing letters. I checked every drawer, every visible compartment, finding nothing unusual. Then I remembered the key. I took it from my purse and examined it in the light. It was small, golden, and antique. It didn't correspond to any of the visible locks on the desk. Frustrated, I sat in the old leather chair that accompanied the desk. Where could this secret compartment be that Edward mentioned? I ran my hands under the desk, searching for any irregularity, and my fingers brushed something. a small indentation barely perceptible. My heart raced as I inserted the key into what turned out to be a tiny hidden lock under the desk. It turned easily, as if it had been recently oiled. I heard a soft click, and to my surprise, a side panel of the desk silently slid open, revealing a narrow, deep compartment. Inside, I found a brown leather notebook and a larger envelope than the one I'd received at the wedding. With trembling hands, I removed both items and placed them on the desk. I opened the envelope first. It contained photographs and financial documents that I didn't completely understand. The photographs showed my daughters-in-law, Victoria and Audrey, meeting with serious-looking men in what appeared to be secret encounters. One image showed Victoria handing a briefcase to a man I didn't recognize. Another showed Audrey at what looked like a bank safety deposit box, removing documents. The financial papers were complex, but I could distinguish something alarming. They appeared to be records of million-dollar transfers to offshore accounts, signed by my sons, but with margin notes written by Edward. Forged, never authorized this. Fraud. With a knot in my stomach, I opened the notebook. It was a diary, written in Edward's unmistakable handwriting. I began reading the last entry, dated 3 days before his supposed accident. I've discovered the truth. Victoria and Audrey are not who they appear to be. They are manipulating my sons, using them to access my accounts. I've discovered unauthorized transfers worth millions. When I confronted Nathan and Daniel, they denied everything, accusing me of senile paranoia, though I'm barely 60. I fear my own sons are involved more deeply than I want to believe. I've gathered enough evidence for a formal complaint, but I need time to organize everything. Thomas is the only one I can trust now. We've planned my temporary disappearance. If something goes wrong and I can't return, I hope Sylvia finds this someday. The truth must come to light, even if it means destroying our family. I dropped the diary, feeling the floor vanishing beneath my feet. Was it possible? Had Edward faked his own death to escape some kind of family conspiracy? Had my own sons and their wives been stealing their father's fortune? The sound of a car parking in front of my house startled me. I looked out the small attic window and saw Victoria's luxury SUV. What was she doing here so early after the wedding? I quickly put everything back in the secret compartment, closed it, and covered the desk with the sheet again. I went downstairs trying to maintain my composure. When I opened the door, Victoria was there with a smile that now seemed completely fake. "Sylvia, I was driving by and thought I'd check on you. You must be tired after the wedding." She entered without waiting for an invitation, as she always did. Victoria was a beautiful, intimidating woman, 15 years younger than my son Nathan, always impeccably dressed, with that air of superiority that I had never quite liked but had learned to tolerate for the sake of family harmony. "Have you thought more about our conversation about selling the house?" she asked, as she sat on my couch, crossing her perfectly waxed legs. "This isn't the time, Victoria. I just got home from my granddaughter's wedding," I replied, controlling the tremor in my voice. She looked around as if appraising the property. "This house is too much for you, Sylvia. Nathan and I are worried. The stairs are dangerous at your age. What if you fall? Who would find you?" "I manage perfectly well," I insisted. Victoria sighed with barely disguised impatience. "We found a buyer willing to pay a considerable sum, more than it's really worth. It would be foolish to reject that offer." "The house is not for sale," I said firmly. Her eyes hardened for an instant, but she quickly smiled again. "Just think about it, okay? By the way, did you receive anything unusual yesterday at the wedding? Abigail mentioned she saw a waiter give you something." My heart skipped a beat. So she had been watching me. "Just a congratulation card from an old friend who couldn't attend?" I lied. Victoria nodded, but something in her expression told me she didn't completely believe me. She rose with feline grace. "I should go. Audrey will come by later to bring you some food. She says you're looking too thin lately." After she left, I collapsed on the sofa, exhausted from the effort of appearing normal. The mention of Audrey coming later put me on alert. Were they monitoring me? What were they really looking for? And most importantly, who was this Thomas that Edward had mentioned, the only one he trusted? I needed to find him if I wanted answers. As I looked out at the lake from my window, a certainty settled in my heart. Edward's letter hadn't just brought a ghost back into my life, it had unleashed a storm that could destroy everything that remained of my family. And I, a widow who was no longer a widow at 72 years old, would have to find the strength to face it. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every whisper of the wind against the windows startled me. I felt as if I were being watched in my own home. Edward's words repeated in my mind. Don't trust your daughters-in-law. Now I understood why. In the morning, I decided I needed to find Thomas, the friend Edward had trusted. The problem was, I didn't know any Thomas close to Edward. In our years together, he had mentioned many associates and friends, but no Thomas that I could remember. I reviewed the diary again, looking for more clues. In earlier entries, Edward mentioned tea on several occasions, referring to meetings and conversations. In an entry from 2 years ago, I found something more concrete. Had lunch with tea at Harbor Cafe today. As always, his advice was invaluable. Sometimes I think he's the only one who truly understands what I'm trying to do. Harbor Cafe. I knew that place. It was a small restaurant by the marina, frequented mainly by local fishermen and sailors. If this Thomas was a regular visitor, perhaps someone there would know him. I dressed in simple clothes, trying not to draw attention. Before leaving, I hid the diary and documents in a different place than the secret compartment in the desk. If my daughters-in-law were searching for something, I didn't want to make it easy for them. Harbor Cafe hadn't changed in decades. The same smell of fried fish and strong coffee, the same wooden tables worn by salt and time. I sat at a table overlooking the marina and ordered a coffee. Mrs. Thornton, what a surprise to see you here, said the waiter, an older man named Frank, whom I knew by sight. Hello, Frank. Yes, I decided to change my routine a bit, I replied with a smile. I hesitated a moment, then decided to take a risk. Frank, do you know a Thomas who frequents this place? I believe he was a friend of my husband, Edward. Frank's expression changed subtly. Thomas? There are several Thomases who come here. This Thomas probably came with my husband. They would have eaten here a few years ago before the accident. Frank looked around, as if making sure nobody was listening to us. Mrs. Thornton, are you referring to Thomas Blackwood? Yes, he and Mr. Thornton were close. They used to sit at that corner table for hours. My heart leaped. Do you know how I can contact him? Thomas still comes occasionally, usually on Thursday afternoons. Always alone, always at the same table. Today was Tuesday. I would have to wait 2 days to possibly meet this man who might have the answers I sought. Thank you, Frank. Please don't mention to anyone that I asked about him, all right? Frank nodded with a serious expression. Be careful, Mrs. Thornton. There are stories about what happened to your husband, stories people don't dare to tell. I left the cafe with more questions than answers. What stories? What did people know that I didn't? Returning home, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked nearby. I didn't think much of it until, upon entering, I perceived something different. It was a subtle feeling, a chair slightly moved, my magazines in a different order than I had left them. Someone had been in my house. I quickly went up to the attic, fearing the worst. The desk was still covered with the sheet, apparently untouched, but when I checked the secret compartment, I knew someone else knew of its existence. The mechanism felt different, as if it had been forced and then carefully closed again. The documents I had left there, fake photographs and unimportant papers I had placed as decoys, had been examined. I thanked my intuition for having made me hide the real ones elsewhere. As I contemplated the violated desk, I heard the doorbell ring. Through the attic window, I saw Audrey's car parked next to the unfamiliar vehicle I had noticed earlier. I went downstairs slowly, my mind racing. If Victoria was ice, Audrey was fire. Even younger than Victoria, at just 35, she had captured my son Daniel's heart with her exotic beauty and overwhelming personality. She had always been effusive with me, almost excessively affectionate, but now I saw her behavior in a new light. "Sylvia, darling," she exclaimed when I opened the door. She carried a steaming casserole. "I brought you beef stew. Victoria told me you looked pale yesterday." Behind her, a serious-looking man waited by the unfamiliar car. "Who is that?" I asked pointedly. Audrey glanced over her shoulder. "Oh, that's Dr. Bennett. He's a family friend, a geriatric specialist. I thought he could give you a quick checkup." "I don't need any checkup," I replied, blocking the entrance. "And next time, call before bringing strangers to my house." Audrey's smile faltered for an instant. "Sylvia, we're just concerned about you. Since the wedding, you've been acting different. Victoria says you were very upset yesterday." "I'm perfectly fine, just tired from the wedding." Audrey exchanged a look with the supposed doctor. "At least, let him examine you quickly. Daniel is very worried. Something about her insistence alarmed me. Were they trying to have me declared incompetent? Was that their plan to take control of the house?" "Tell Daniel, I'll call him later. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to rest." I closed the door before she could protest further. Through the window, I watched as Audrey spoke heatedly with the man. He pulled out a phone and made a call while she gestured with frustration. They were plotting something, and I had to discover what it was before it was too late. Thursday couldn't come soon enough. Wednesday passed with agonizing slowness. I received calls from both sons, each expressing concern that now sounded false to my ears. "Mom, Audrey says you refused to see the doctor," said Daniel, with that condescending tone he had developed in recent years. "You can't keep being so stubborn. At your age, regular checkups are important. Since when do I need Audrey's permission to decide about my own health?" I replied more sharply than I intended. There was a tense silence. "What's wrong with you lately, Mom? Since the wedding, you've been different." "Maybe I'm finally seeing things as they really are, son." Daniel sighed. "We'll talk when you're calmer. We love you, Mom. We're just trying to take care of you." Nathan was more direct. "I've spoken with a lawyer about selling the house. It's the best for everyone, Mom. You could have a smaller apartment, and the rest of the money would serve to guarantee your future care. The house is not for sale, Nathan, and I don't need you to make decisions for me." "For God's sake, Mom. Why are you being so obstinate?" "Victoria says you found something at the wedding, something that upset you." "What was it?" His direct question caught me by surprise. How much did they know? Were they looking for Edward's letter? "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied, trying to sound confused. "Mom, if you know something that you should tell us." "The only thing I know," I interrupted, "is that my sons seem more interested in my house than in my well-being. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have things to do." I hung up feeling a deep pain in my heart. These were my sons, the babies I had cradled in my arms, the children whose tears I had dried, and whose scraped knees I had bandaged. How had we come to this? That night, as I reviewed Edward's documents and diary again, I found something I had overlooked. An old photograph where Edward appeared with a man in his 50s, both on a dock with fishing gear. On the back, in Edward's handwriting, it said, "With Thomas, my brother from another mother, Mapleton Marina." I studied the man's face, committing it to memory. If it was the same Thomas who frequented Harbor Cafe, tomorrow I would finally get some answers. I carefully hid everything and prepared for bed, but sleep wouldn't come. The words from Edward's diary spun in my head. "I fear my own sons are involved more deeply than I want to believe." How deep did this conspiracy go? Had my sons really been capable of betraying their father like this? Or were they simply pawns manipulated by their ambitious wives? And the question that tormented me most, if Edward was alive, why had he waited 15 years to contact me? With these doubts hammering my mind, I fell asleep in the living room armchair, watching the front door in case someone tried to enter my house again. Thursday dawned cloudy, with that grayish light that makes the lake look like liquid silver. I dressed carefully, choosing discreet but elegant clothes. If I was going to meet Thomas, I wanted to make a good impression. I arrived at Harbor Cafe at 4 in the afternoon. Frank greeted me with a meaningful look and subtly pointed toward a corner table. There, with his back to the entrance, sat an older man with white hair, contemplating the lake while drinking what appeared to be a whiskey. I took a deep breath and approached. When I was a few steps from his table, the man spoke without turning around. "I've been expecting you, Mrs. Thornton. Please, sit down." His voice was deep, with a slight accent I couldn't identify. I sat across from him and finally saw his face. It was the same man from the photograph, only 15 years older, with deep wrinkles around his eyes and a scar crossing his left cheek. "Thomas Blackwood?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He nodded slowly. "The same. I suppose Edward finally contacted you. You delivered the letter at my granddaughter's wedding?" Thomas shook his head. "I just wrote it following Edward's instructions. One of my men delivered it, too risky for me to be seen." "Where is he?" I asked, leaning forward. "Where is Edward?" Thomas took a sip of his drink before answering. "In a safe place. Or at least I hope so. We haven't had contact in 3 weeks." "He's alive? All this time he's been alive?" My voice broke slightly. "Yes, Mrs. Thornton. Edward faked his death 15 years ago when he discovered his life was in danger." "Danger from what? From whom?" Thomas looked around before answering in a low voice. "From his own family. From your sons and their wives." Despite the evidence I had found, hearing it from this stranger's lips made reality hit me like an icy wave. "Why? For money?" "Not just money, Mrs. Thornton. Edward discovered something much worse. His companies were being used to launder money for an international criminal organization. It started with small operations that seemed legitimate, but gradually, the network grew larger." I felt breathless. My Edward, a respected businessman, involved in money laundering? "Edward didn't know at first," continued Thomas, as if he had read my thoughts. "When he discovered what was happening, it was already too late. Your sons, especially Nathan, had been signing agreements with these people for years, using their father's name and reputation." "My sons?" My voice came out as a broken whisper. Thomas nodded gravely. "Nathan was recruited first, through Victoria. She is not who she claims to be. Before meeting your son, Victoria worked for this organization. Their marriage was planned from the beginning." My mind went back to the past, remembering how Nathan had met Victoria on a business trip to Atlanta, how he had returned completely in love, saying he had never met a woman like her. And Audrey? The same. 2 years later, when they saw how well their plan was working with Nathan, they sent Audrey for Daniel. Both women had the mission to infiltrate the Thornton family and facilitate the use of the companies for illicit operations. I placed a hand on my chest, feeling my heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. My daughters-in-law, these women who had given birth to my grandchildren, were actually infiltrators from a criminal organization. "This is too much," I finally said. "How do I know you're telling me the truth? Why should I believe you?" Thomas pulled a mobile phone from his jacket. "Because I have this." He pressed a button and suddenly, my son Nathan's voice filled the space between us, low enough that only I could hear it. "Dad is getting suspicious. He found documents he shouldn't have seen. What do you want us to do?" A female voice, clearly Victoria's, responded. "We've already discussed this, Nathan. If your father becomes a problem, we'll have to eliminate him. The bosses won't tolerate risks. Remember how much money you've made from all this? He's my father, Victoria. And that old desk of his is full of evidence that could send us all to prison. You choose, your father or your future." Thomas turned off the recording. This was 3 weeks before Edward's supposed accident. I have dozens of recordings like this. Tears rolled down my cheeks uncontrollably. How could Nathan, my firstborn, talk about his own father that way? When Edward discovered the truth, continued Thomas, he knew his life was in danger. He came to me because I was his only friend outside these people's circle of influence. We worked together in the Merchant Marine decades ago, before he built his empire. Why fake his death? Why not report them? It wasn't that simple. This organization has contacts everywhere, even in the police and the judicial system. Edward needed time to gather enough evidence to trace the money to the real bosses. And he needed to protect you. Me? I asked, surprised. Edward never stopped loving you, Sylvia. He knew that if he simply disappeared or reported his sons, you would suffer the consequences. Or worse, you could become a target. By faking his death in a boating accident, he accomplished two things: escaping immediate danger and ensuring you remained above suspicion. But he left me believing he was dead for 15 years, I said bitterly. He let me cry over an empty casket. Thomas lowered his gaze. That was the hardest part for him. Many times he wanted to contact you, but every time he tried to get close, the surveillance around you intensified. Your daughters-in-law never stopped watching you, Sylvia. They feared Edward might have left information with you. And why contact me now, after so much time? Because he has finally gathered all the necessary evidence, documents, recordings, bank records, everything needed to unmask the entire operation. But something went wrong. 3 weeks ago, his hiding place was discovered. He managed to escape by a hair's breadth, but he lost contact with me. His last message was to deliver that letter to you and tell you to look in the desk. My mind was working at full speed, trying to process everything I was hearing. Do you think he's... I couldn't finish the sentence. Dead? Thomas shook his head. Edward is a survivor. I believe he's hiding, waiting for the right moment to complete his plan. But he needs your help. My help? I'm an old woman of 72. What can I do? Thomas leaned toward me, his face intense. The desk, Sylvia. Edward stored something more there than the diary and photographs. There's a code, a numerical combination that only you would know. That combination opens a safe deposit box where the real evidence is stored. The evidence that can bring down the entire organization. What combination? I don't remember any code. Edward said you would know it when the time came. Something related to a place and date important to both of you. I tried to think, but my mind was too overwhelmed by all the revelations. Thomas seemed to perceive my confusion. Don't worry, Sylvia. You have time to remember, but not much. Your daughters-in-law are nervous. They know something has changed, that someone has been in contact with you. They're going to intensify their efforts. What do you mean? The Dr. Audrey brought yesterday. He wasn't any geriatric specialist, but a psychiatrist paid to evaluate you. They're preparing the ground to have you declared mentally incompetent and take control of your assets, including the house. A chill ran down my spine. How do you know? I have my sources. And I have people watching your house to protect you. You're not alone in this, Sylvia. Suddenly, Thomas looked at his watch, and his expression changed. We have to end this conversation. You've been followed. What? I turned around alarmed. Don't look back. A man entered the cafe 5 minutes after you. He works for them. Listen carefully. Go home as if nothing has happened. Act normal. Look for the code. When you find it, send me a message at this number. He slid a card under the table. We'll meet again in a safe place. But there's no time, Sylvia. Your life may depend on this. Edward risked everything to protect you and expose the truth. Now it's up to us to complete what he started. With those words, Thomas rose, left some bills on the table, and exited through a back door of the cafe, without looking back. I sat for a few minutes, trying to control my breathing and the tears that threatened to flow again. Finally, I stood up with all the dignity I could muster, and left the cafe. As I passed by the counter, Frank gave me a concerned look. He asked if everything was all right. Perfectly, I replied with a forced smile. Just old memories. I walked slowly toward my house, feeling the weight of each revelation on my shoulders. My family, my entire life, had all been an elaborate lie. Edward alive. My sons corrupt. My daughters-in-law spies. It was like waking up in a completely different world. And now I had a mission, to find that code, before they found me. Upon arriving home, I immediately noticed something was wrong. The front door was slightly ajar, though I was sure I had locked it when I left. Cautiously, I entered silently, listening for any sound that might indicate the presence of intruders. I heard voices coming from the second floor. I immediately recognized Victoria's, but there was also another male voice I couldn't identify. I approached the stairs, trying to listen to their conversation. "The desk is up here, but I've already checked it thoroughly. There's nothing unusual," Victoria was saying. "There must be something we overlooked," replied the man. "The old man wouldn't have contacted her if he hadn't left some important clue." "My mother-in-law doesn't know anything," insisted Victoria. "She's just an old woman living in the past." "Your old mother-in-law just met with Thomas Blackwood at Harbor Cafe," the man responded with irritation. "Clearly she knows more than she appears to." I held my breath. They had followed me, just as Thomas had warned. And now they were openly searching my house, not bothering to hide their intentions. The situation was more serious than I had imagined. I decided that confronting them directly would be dangerous. Instead, I silently backed up to the door and opened and closed it loudly, as if I had just arrived. "Hello? Is anyone home?" I called with feigned innocence. Hurried footsteps and alarmed whispers on the upper floor confirmed my suspicions. A few moments later, Victoria came down the stairs with a perfectly rehearsed smile. "Sylvia, what a surprise. I didn't expect to find you out." "This is my house, Victoria. The surprise is finding you here when I didn't invite you," I replied coldly. Victoria didn't flinch. "Nathan gave me a key years ago, remember? I was passing by and thought I'd check that everything was okay. You've had us worried lately." "And who is with you upstairs?" I asked directly. A shadow of surprise crossed her face, but she quickly regained her composure. "Oh, it's just Roger, the property appraiser. Since you're still considering selling the house, we thought we'd advance some procedures." "I never said I would consider selling," I replied. "And I don't appreciate you entering my house without permission, with strangers, when I'm not present." The man came down the stairs at that moment. He was tall and thin, with an angular face and penetrating eyes that studied me with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. "Mrs. Thornton, a pleasure to meet you. Your house is truly impressive." "Thank you. And now, if you've finished invading my privacy, I would appreciate it if you left." Victoria and the supposed appraiser exchanged glances. There was tension in the air, almost palpable. "Of course, Sylvia," Victoria finally said. "We're just trying to help. By the way, where have you been all afternoon? Nathan called several times and was worried when he couldn't find you." "I went for a walk by the lake, and then had a coffee," I replied vaguely. I didn't know I needed to report my movements. Victoria smiled, but her eyes remained cold. "Of course not, darling. We're just concerned about you." When they finally left, I locked the door and leaned against it, exhausted. The danger was real and immediate. If they had been willing to openly enter my house to search for whatever they believed Edward had left, what else would they be willing to do? I quickly went up to the attic to check the desk. As I suspected, the sheet was disheveled, and all the drawers had been opened. The secret compartment had also been discovered, but fortunately, the real documents were safe in another hiding place. I sat in the old leather chair, trying to think. Thomas had mentioned a code, a numerical combination that only I would know, related to a place and date important to Edward and me. I closed my eyes, trying to recall significant moments from our life together. Our wedding, the births of our sons, our first house. So many important memories. And then I saw it, carved on the inner part of the desk, almost imperceptible, unless you knew exactly where to look. A small heart carved into the wood with our initials and a date, July 4th, 1973. The day we met When I was waiting tables at the diner, and he came in after a sailing race. The day that changed our lives forever. 070473. An 8-digit combination. Could it be that simple? I examined the desk again, looking for somewhere this combination might be used. There were no visible numerical locks, no panels that might conceal a safe. Frustrated, I ran my fingers across every inch of the furniture, searching for any anomaly. That's when I noticed something strange about one of the desk legs. The wood sounded hollow compared to the other 3 legs. I knelt down, examining the base of the leg. There was a small indentation, almost invisible to the naked eye. I pressed it, and a panel slid open, revealing an old but functional numeric keypad. With trembling hands, I entered the sequence. I heard a soft click, and the entire leg opened like a small door, revealing a tubular compartment inside. It contained an object wrapped in cloth. I carefully removed it and unwrapped it to find a USB drive and a small key with a tag that read, First National Bank, Box 2. Edward had hidden the evidence in a bank safety deposit box, and I had just found the key to access it. Quickly, I closed the secret compartment and went down to my bedroom. I needed to contact Thomas immediately, but first I wanted to check the contents of the USB drive. I turned on my old laptop, praying it would still function properly. While waiting for it to boot up, I glanced out the window to check if anyone was watching the house. I didn't see anything suspicious, but that didn't mean I was safe. The computer finally started, and I connected the USB drive. It contained a single folder named For Sylvia. Inside were a video file and several PDF documents. I opened the video first. Edward's image appeared on the screen, and my heart leaped. It was him, my Edward, but 15 years older than I remembered. His hair completely white, new wrinkles lining his face, but with the same warm amber eyes I had loved so much. "Sylvia, my love," he began, his voice slightly rougher, but unmistakably his. "If you're watching this, it means you've found the code and Thomas has kept his promise to contact you. I don't have much time, so I'll be brief." He paused, his eyes shining with contained emotion. "First, forgive me. Forgive me for these 15 years of absence, for making you believe I was dead, for the pain I caused you. It was the hardest decision of my life, but it was the only way to keep you safe." Tears were streaming down my cheeks as I listened. In the attached files, you'll find all the evidence I've collected about the criminal organization that infiltrated our companies and our family. Names, dates, transactions, everything needed to bring them all down. There's also evidence of Nathan and Daniel's involvement, and about the true identities of Victoria and Audrey. He ran a hand across his face, visibly exhausted. "Our sons, Sylvia, I don't know when we lost our way with them. Maybe it was my fault for being so obsessed with business, for not being present enough. Or maybe they simply chose poorly, seduced by easy money and power." Edward looked directly at the camera, as if he could see me across time and distance. "The key to the safety deposit box you found is important, but it's not everything. There's another box, a larger one, in a location only you and I know about. The place where we shared our first kiss, where you said yes when I proposed. There you'll find the rest of what you need, including the means to start a new life, far away from all this." His image moved closer to the camera. "Sylvia, I have loved you every day of these 15 years. Not a single moment has passed that I haven't wished to be with you, to see you, to touch you, to tell you the truth. If the plan works, and if you still feel something for me after all that's happened, perhaps we can have a second chance. Thomas knows how to find me, if that's what you want." A voice off camera alerted him to something, and Edward looked alarmed to one side. "I have to go. People are coming, remember. Trust only Thomas. No one else. I love you, Sylvia. I've always loved you." The screen went black, leaving me with a lump in my throat and my heart beating wildly. Edward was alive. He had suffered and fought all these years, not only to expose the truth, but to protect me. And now he was asking me to complete what he had begun. Wiping away my tears, I pulled out the phone and sent a message to the number Thomas had given me. I found the code and the key. Also a message from Edward. "We need to talk." The response came almost immediately. "Not safe to use this phone. Destroy the SIM card and throw the phone away. Expect a visit early tomorrow. Be ready to leave. Trust no one else." I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. I had gone from being a quiet grandmother widow to being in the middle of a criminal conspiracy in a matter of days. But I had no choice. For Edward, for the truth, for my own safety, I had to move forward. I hid the USB drive and key in a place no one would think to look, inside the stuffing of an old teddy bear that had belonged to Abigail when she was small. Then, following Thomas's instructions, I destroyed the SIM card in my phone and threw it in the trash. That night, I barely slept, alternating between vigilance and preparation. I packed a small suitcase with essentials, clothes, medications, some invaluable keepsakes, and all the cash I had in the house. I didn't know how long I'd be gone or what awaited me, but something told me I wouldn't be returning soon to this house that had been my home for so many years. As I watched the dawn from my window, I thought about Edward's words, the place where we shared our first kiss, where you said yes when I proposed. I smiled, remembering it. The old lighthouse on Pine Point, a few miles from Mapleton. There, under the moonlight, a young Edward had kissed me for the first time. And years later, at that same spot, he had proposed with a small ring he could barely afford. In that lighthouse was another key, another secret Edward had kept for me. And soon, if all went well, I would discover what it was. The sound of a car parking in front of my house interrupted my thoughts. I looked out cautiously and saw Thomas getting out of a modest gray sedan. The time had come to leave. With one last look at my home, I took my suitcase and went out to face the unknown, driven by a mixture of fear, determination, and the hope of seeing Edward again after so many years. What I didn't know then was that the danger was much greater than I imagined, and that the next 24 hours would test every ounce of strength I had left. Thomas quickly led me to his car, casting nervous glances up and down the street. "Good morning, Mrs. Thornton. We don't have much time. Did you find what Edward mentioned?" I nodded, patting my purse where I carried the teddy bear with the USB and key hidden inside. "Everything's here, and I know where the other box Edward mentioned is located." "Excellent," said Thomas, starting the engine. "Let's go to the bank first. We need the contents of that safety deposit box as soon as possible." As we drove away from my house, I noticed a dark car parked half a block away. Two men were sitting inside, apparently watching us. "I think we're being watched," I murmured. Thomas nodded without surprise. "I know. They're Roger Phelps' men, the appraiser who came with your daughter-in-law yesterday. In reality, he's one of the organization's lieutenants." My heart raced. Will they follow us? Probably, but I have a plan to shake them. Thomas turned sharply onto a side street, then another and another, zigzagging through narrow streets. I hardly knew, despite having lived in the city all my life. After several minutes of this evasive driving, we entered the underground parking garage of a shopping mall. Thomas drove to the lowest level and parked next to another car, identical to the one we were using. "Quick," he said, turning off the engine. "We're switching vehicles." In a matter of seconds, we transferred my belongings to the other car and left through a different exit from the parking garage. The change had been so swift, I barely had time to process it. "Do you do this often?" I asked as we merged into the morning traffic. Thomas gave a tense smile. "For 15 years I've helped Edward stay hidden. You learn a few tricks." First National Bank was in the financial district of the city, an imposing building of glass and steel that contrasted with the colonial architecture of the surroundings. "How will we enter without being seen?" I asked, concerned about security cameras and potential watchers. "We can't avoid being seen," Thomas replied. "But we can control how they see us. From the glove compartment, he took out a blonde wig and large glasses. Put these on, and this hat. If anyone reviews the recordings later, at least they won't recognize you immediately. I put on the improvised disguise, feeling ridiculous but understanding the necessity. Thomas also put on a cap and sunglasses. One last thing, he said, handing me an identification card. From now on, you're Margaret Clark, my sister. We've come to collect some family jewelry for your daughter's wedding. I took the fake ID, surprised by the thoroughness with which Thomas had planned all this. Did Edward plan this part too? I asked. Thomas shook his head. Edward left the general guidelines. I've improvised the details as the situation demanded. We entered the bank with a determined but casual pace. Thomas guided me to the safety deposit box area, where a young executive received us with a professional smile. Good morning, how can I help you? Thomas responded with a naturalness that surprised me. Good morning, miss. My sister and I need to access safety deposit box 2. We have the key and the necessary documentation. We presented the fake IDs and the key. The executive verified everything in her system and nodded, satisfied. Of course, Mr. Clark. Please follow me. She led us to a private room with metal walls and a central table. I'll leave you alone to review your belongings. When you're finished, press the button by the door. As soon as the door closed, Thomas pulled latex gloves from his pocket and offered me a pair. It's better not to leave fingerprints, he explained. Just in case. Box 2784 turned out to be larger than I expected. Thomas placed it on the table and yielded me the honor of opening it with the key. Inside we found several thick envelopes, an old cell phone, a small pistol, and a passport in the name of Sylvia Carter, with my photograph, but different personal data. Edward had everything planned, I murmured, surprised by the thoroughness of the preparations. Thomas nodded as he examined the envelopes. Edward was always meticulous in his planning. We opened the envelopes one by one. They contained bank documents, records of suspicious transactions, photographs of meetings between my sons and known criminals, and a detailed list of properties and companies used for money laundering. This is enough to bring down the entire organization, Thomas said with admiration. Edward has collected evidence for 15 years. In the last envelope we found something that left me breathless. Copies of the original documents of Edward's accident, along with evidence that everything had been carefully orchestrated. There were receipts for payments to corrupt officials, false testimonies, everything necessary to declare a living man dead. What do we do now with all this? I asked, overwhelmed by the amount of information. Thomas put everything in his briefcase, except for the passport and phone, which he handed to me. Now we go to the lighthouse. If Edward left something else there, we'll need to have everything before proceeding. We left the bank as discreetly as we had entered. Thomas maintained constant vigilance, but there seemed to be no sign that we had been followed. As we headed toward Pine Point, I activated the phone Edward had left. To my surprise, it had battery and signal. There was only one number saved, labeled simply as E. Do you think it's Edward's number? I asked Thomas. He looked at the phone with caution. Possibly, but don't call yet. We don't know who might be monitoring communication. The road to the lighthouse was narrow and winding, bordering cliffs that dropped directly to the lake. As we advanced, my memories of youth with Edward became more vivid. This had been our special place, our refuge from the world. Pine Point Lighthouse rose majestic over the rocks, abandoned for decades but still imposing against the blue sky. We parked at a distance and completed the journey on foot. Are you sure this is where Edward would hide something important? Thomas asked as we climbed the steep path. I'm sure, I replied. This place meant everything to us. The interior of the lighthouse was just as I remembered it. Worn stone floors, peeling walls, and a spiral staircase ascending to the tower. We climbed slowly, each step bringing a different memory. This is where he gave me my first gift, a small seashell he had found on the beach, I said, pointing to a niche in the wall. And this is where we took shelter from an unexpected storm, and spent the whole night talking about our dreams. Thomas listened respectfully as I dusted off memories I had kept stored away for years. We reached the top of the lighthouse, where the rotating light, now silent and rusty, dominated a small circular room. The windows offered a spectacular view of the lake, but I wasn't there for the scenery. "Here," I said, pointing to a loose stone on the floor. "The first time we came, Edward said this would be our secret hiding place. We used to keep messages and small gifts under this stone." Thomas helped me move it. Underneath was a hollow in the floor, and inside it, a metal box sealed with a small padlock. "We'll need a key," said Thomas. I smiled as I pulled out a necklace I always wore under my clothes. Hanging from it was a small key that Edward had given me on our first anniversary. "Always carry it with you," he had told me then. "Someday it will open something important." The key fit perfectly in the padlock. Inside the box we found several envelopes, more documents, an address book, a thick wad of cash in different currencies, and a sealed envelope with my name written in Edward's unmistakable handwriting. "It's a letter for me," I murmured, taking it with trembling hands. "Open it," Thomas encouraged me. "It might contain important instructions." Carefully, I broke the seal of the envelope and extracted several handwritten pages. Edward's handwriting, so familiar to me, filled every line with blue ink. "My dear Sylvia, if you're reading this, it means you've followed the clues and trusted Thomas as I had hoped. You were always braver and smarter than you believed yourself to be. What you've discovered so far is just the tip of the iceberg. The criminal organization that infiltrated our companies is much larger and more powerful than you can imagine. They have connections with politicians, judges, high-ranking police officers. During these 15 years, I have reconstructed the entire network, following the money, the connections, identifying the real leaders. It pains me to confirm what you already suspect. Our sons are deeply involved. Nathan, from the beginning, manipulated by Victoria, who was never who she claimed to be. Daniel joined later, influenced by Audrey and by his brother's apparent prosperity. I cannot tell you how much it has tormented me to see our sons become this, to know they chose the wrong path. I constantly wonder where we failed, what we could have done differently. Perhaps I was too absent, too focused on building an empire that, ironically, would end up being used for evil. In the address book, you'll find contact information for people I trust. Incorruptible journalists, some law enforcement agents who are beyond the organization's reach, and an international prosecutor who has been discreetly following this case for years. The money is for you, so you can start a new life, if you so wish. I've prepared a new identity for you, a safe place to live. Everything you need to disappear if you choose that option. But there is also another possibility, one that I hardly dare to mention. If after all that has happened, you can still forgive me for abandoning you, for letting you believe I was dead, there is the possibility that we might meet again. Thomas knows where I am currently hiding. It is dangerous, very dangerous, but if you decide to take the risk, he will take you to me. Whatever your decision, remember that I have loved you every day of my life, even in these 15 years of forced separation. The memory of your face, your voice, your hands in mine, is the only thing that has kept me sane and strong enough to continue. Forever yours, Edward. Tears flowed freely down my cheeks as I finished reading. I didn't try to stop them. These were tears I had held back for 15 years, tears of pain, of loss, but also of renewed hope. "Are you all right, Mrs. Thornton?" Thomas asked with genuine concern. "Yes," I replied, wiping the tears with the back of my hand. "It's just that, after so long believing he was dead, reading his words, knowing he's been thinking of me all these years." Thomas nodded with understanding. "Edward never stopped loving you. He talked about you constantly, kept newspaper clippings from local events where you appeared, had pictures of you everywhere. I carefully stored the letter with the other documents. What do we do now? That depends on you," Thomas replied. We can deliver all the evidence to the appropriate authorities, those that Edward mentions in the address book. That would dismantle the organization and bring your sons and daughters-in-law to justice. The weight of that decision hit me with all its force, turning in my own sons to the authorities, sending them to prison for who knows how many years. Despite what they had done, they were still my sons, the babies I had cradled in my arms. And the other option? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I can take you to Edward. You can escape together, start a new life somewhere far away, with new identities, but you would have to leave everything behind, including justice for the guilty. What would Edward do? Thomas reflected for a moment. Edward has dedicated 15 years of his life to gathering this evidence. He has risked everything to expose the truth and dismantle this organization. But he has also spent 15 years missing you. I believe he would respect whatever decision you make, but deep down, he desires both things, justice and a second chance with you. I looked out the lighthouse window toward the infinite lake, the same waters that had supposedly claimed Edward's life 15 years ago. So many memories, so many lost years. Is it possible to do both? I finally asked. Deliver the evidence and then reunite with Edward? Thomas smiled slightly. It's risky, but it might work. We would have to be extremely careful with the timing. Once the evidence goes public, the entire organization will panic. They'll try to eliminate any loose ends, including us. I took a deep breath, making my decision. Then that's what we'll do. Justice first, and then a second chance. It's what Edward would want, and it's what I want too. Thomas nodded with approval. It's dangerous, but it's the right thing to do. Besides, he added with a gleam in his eyes, I'm good at dangerous situations. As we collected everything Edward had left in his secret hiding place, a noise below alerted us. Footsteps on the spiral staircase. Someone's coming, Thomas whispered, quickly pulling out a gun from his jacket. Mom, are you up there? Nathan's voice echoed through the stairwell. My heart skipped a beat. How had he found us? And what was he doing here? Sylvia, I know you're there with Thomas. Victoria saw you leave with him this morning. We need to talk. Thomas looked at me, his expression tense. We don't know if he came alone. It could be a trap. He's my son, I replied, though I was no longer sure what that really meant. Mom, Nathan's voice sounded closer. Please, I just want to talk. I'm alone. I promise. Thomas positioned himself by the door, gun in hand. He gestured for me to respond. I'm up here, Nathan, I said, trying to make my voice sound normal. How did you know where to find me? This was Dad's favorite place, he replied, his voice getting closer. He used to bring me here when I was a kid. He told me how he proposed to you right here. Those memories surprised me. I didn't know Edward had shared that special place with our children. Nathan appeared at the top of the stairs. He was alone, as he had said, and looked agitated and nervous. Mom, he said, panting slightly from the climb. Then he saw Thomas and the gun pointed at him. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need to talk to you. How do we know you haven't brought your friends with you? Thomas asked harshly. Nathan raised his hands in surrender. I'm alone, I swear. No one knows I'm here, not even Victoria. Something in his expression, a vulnerability I hadn't seen in years, made me believe him. It's okay, Thomas. Let's hear what he has to say. Thomas lowered the gun slightly, but remained alert. Nathan took a hesitant step toward me. Mom, I know what you've discovered. I know Dad is alive and that he's been collecting evidence all these years. How do you know that? I asked, surprised. Because I saw him 3 weeks ago, Nathan replied, to my astonishment. He contacted me secretly. He wanted to give me one last chance to do the right thing before turning in all the evidence. I looked at Thomas for confirmation. He nodded slightly. It's true. Edward insisted on trying to rescue Nathan. I was against it, but he was determined to give his son a chance. And what did you tell your father? I asked Nathan, my voice barely a whisper. My son lowered his gaze, ashamed. At first, I denied everything. Then I got angry with him for abandoning us, for faking his death. Finally, when he showed me some of the evidence he had against me, against all of us, I broke down. Tears began to roll down his cheeks. I told him everything, Mom. How Victoria manipulated me from the beginning. How gradually I got involved in increasingly shady operations. How when I wanted to get out, it was already too late. I was too compromised. They knew too much about me. And why should I believe you now? I asked, my heart torn between skepticism and the desperate hope of a mother. Because I've been helping Dad since then, he replied. I've been passing him information from inside, documenting meetings, recording conversations. I'm trying to make amends for my mistakes, though I know I can never fully repair them. Thomas intervened. It's true. Nathan has been cooperating with us. Thanks to him, we were able to fill in some important gaps in the investigation. And Victoria? I asked. Your wife? Nathan's face darkened. Victoria never loved me, Mom. She was assigned to me as a mission. Our entire relationship has been a lie. He paused painfully. Even Abigail, it hurts me to say this, but Victoria has been using her as one more tool to manipulate me, to keep me in line. Does your daughter know anything about this? I asked, horrified. No, she's innocent. That's why I'm here now. I want to protect her from all this. I want her to have a chance to live a normal life when everything explodes. Thomas approached us. Nathan has been in contact with the international prosecutor that Edward mentioned in his letter. He has agreed to testify in exchange for some leniency and protection for Abigail. I looked at my son, seeing for the first time in many years the boy I had raised, not the corrupt man he had become. And Daniel? Is he also involved in this? Nathan shook his head. Daniel doesn't know anything. Audrey keeps him completely manipulated. He really believes he's helping the family business, that everything is legitimate. He's ambitious and vain, but he's not aware of the true nature of the business. A small consolation, but consolation nonetheless. At least one of my sons hadn't consciously chosen the wrong path. What do we do now? I asked, addressing both Nathan and Thomas. Thomas holstered his gun and checked his watch. We have to move quickly. Prosecutor Hamilton is waiting for the evidence. Once he has it, he'll set in motion simultaneous operations to arrest everyone involved. And Edward? Where is he? In a safe place, Thomas replied. But not for long. The organization has intensified its search after his last meeting with Nathan. They suspect something big is about to happen. Nathan took my hands in his. Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness or your trust. What we've done, what I've done, is unforgivable. But please, let me help you now. Let me do something good for once. I looked into my son's eyes, searching for the truth in them. I saw remorse, fear, and, for the first time in a long time, sincerity. What do you propose? Victoria and Audrey are going to visit you this afternoon. They have orders from their superiors to find out exactly what you know and what you have. If they don't get the information, they have instructions to silence you permanently. A chill ran down my spine. My daughters-in-law, the mothers of my grandchildren, had orders to kill me. We can use that to our advantage, continued Nathan. I'll go back home, as if nothing had happened. I'll tell them I looked for you but couldn't find you. Meanwhile, you deliver the evidence to Prosecutor Hamilton. Once everything is in motion, I'll take Abigail to a safe place. Thomas nodded, evaluating the plan. It could work, but there's one problem. Once we deliver the evidence, it will be several hours before the arrests begin. During that time, we'll all be in danger. I have an idea, I said, surprising myself with the clarity with which it formed in my mind. If Victoria and Audrey are going to visit me this afternoon, I'll have a surprise ready for them. I'll make them believe I've found something important, something Edward left hidden in the house. I'll keep them busy while you make sure the evidence reaches the right hands. It's too dangerous, Nathan protested. They'll kill you without thinking twice if they suspect anything. Your mother is stronger than you think, said Thomas with an appreciative smile. And smarter. Besides, she won't be alone. I have people watching the house. I looked at my son and then at Thomas. And afterward? What will happen to me, to Edward? Thomas looked at me seriously. If everything goes according to plan, you can reunite with Edward tonight. I have passports, money, and plane tickets ready. You can start a new life together, far away from all this. And us, Mom? Nathan asked with a broken voice. Will I ever see you again? I had no answer for that. My son had betrayed his father, had been involved in criminal activities, had allowed his wife to monitor me and plan to eliminate me, but he was also my son, the child I had held in my arms hours after his birth, whom I had taught to walk, whom I had comforted when he had nightmares. Time will tell, Nathan, I finally replied. First, do the right thing. Protect Abigail. Cooperate fully with the authorities. Pay for your mistakes. And perhaps, someday, when all this is behind us, I didn't finish the sentence, but it wasn't necessary. Nathan nodded, understanding. We moved quickly after that. Nathan returned to his car and headed back to the city to maintain appearances. Thomas and I took all the evidence and headed to a small house on the outskirts, where, according to him, Prosecutor Hamilton was waiting for us. The prosecutor turned out to be a man in his 50s, with penetrating eyes and an air of authority that inspired confidence. He meticulously reviewed all the evidence we had gathered, occasionally asking questions and taking detailed notes. This is extraordinary, he finally said. Your husband has done incredible work documenting the entire operation. With this and your son's testimony, we can dismantle the entire network. When will the arrests begin? Thomas asked. Tonight, at 10 o'clock sharp. Simultaneous operations in different locations. We can't risk news leaking and some escaping. The prosecutor looked at me directly. Mrs. Thornton, I understand you plan to set a trap for your daughters-in-law this afternoon. I must warn you that it's extremely dangerous. I'm aware of the risk, I replied calmly. But we need to keep them distracted while you prepare everything. I'll have trusted agents near your house, offered the prosecutor. At the first sign of danger, they'll intervene. We spent the next few hours refining the details of the plan. Thomas explained exactly how I should act with Victoria and Audrey, what to say to keep them interested without raising suspicions. The prosecutor coordinated with his teams the details of the simultaneous arrests. I tried to stay calm, but my mind kept returning to Edward. After 15 years, tonight we would finally reunite. At 5 in the afternoon, Thomas drove me back to my house. By then, there were undercover agents strategically positioned in the surroundings. Remember, Thomas told me as he dropped me off at the entrance. Act normal but slightly nervous. Give them small clues, make them believe you know something important, but that you're unsure about trusting them. Keep them busy at least until 9. And then, at 9:45 exactly, I'll come for you. By then, the teams will be in position and almost ready to act. I'll take you to Edward before the operation begins. He gave me a small device, similar to a button. This is a tracker and panic button. If you feel you're in immediate danger, press it 3 times quickly. The agents will intervene immediately. I entered my house, feeling as if I were walking to my own execution. The weight of everything I had discovered, of everything that was about to happen, fell on my shoulders like a lead slab. But I also felt a fierce determination. For Edward, for justice, for truth. I had to be strong for a few more hours. Precisely at 6:30, as Nathan had predicted, the doorbell rang. Victoria and Audrey were at my door, smiling as always, hiding their true intentions behind a mask of family concern. Sylvia, exclaimed Victoria, hugging me. We were so worried. Nathan looked for you everywhere. I decided to take a long walk, I replied, letting them in. I needed to think. Audrey looked at me with feigned concern. Think? About what, Sylvia? I sat on the sofa, indicating they should do the same. I watched as they exchanged subtle glances, how they studied the room looking for anything out of place. About Edward, I finally said. About the past, Victoria tensed slightly. Edward? Why think about him after so much time? I pretended to hesitate, as if considering whether to trust them. I found something strange. Both leaned forward, their interest barely disguised. What did you find? Asked Audrey, her voice falsely casual. Letters, I replied. Letters that seemed to have been written after his death. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. That's impossible, Sylvia. Edward died 15 years ago. They're probably old letters you forgot about. Perhaps, I conceded. But they seem recent. And they mention things that happened after his supposed death. Audrey and Victoria exchanged another look, this time more alarmed. Where did you find these letters? Asked Audrey. I looked toward the ceiling, as if pointing to something. In the attic. I was cleaning and found a box I didn't remember seeing before. Can we see them? Asked Victoria, trying to sound disinterested but failing miserably. I rose slowly, as if considering the request. They're upstairs. I'm not sure if I should show them. They say strange things. We're family, Sylvia, insisted Victoria, also standing up. You can trust us. Maybe we can help you understand what this is all about. Maybe you're right, I conceded. Come up to the attic with me. I'll show you where I found them. As we climbed the stairs, I felt the growing tension between my daughters-in-law. I could almost hear their minds working, planning how to obtain the letters, and then silence me. But they didn't know that each step they took brought them closer to their own downfall. The cat and mouse game had begun. But this time, for the first time in years, I was not the mouse. The clock marked 9:30 when I finally achieved what I had set out to do: keep Victoria and Audrey busy and confused for hours, making them believe I had crucial information, but without revealing anything concrete. I had led them all over the house, from the attic to the basement, showing them supposed hiding places, empty boxes, false clues, all while they became increasingly impatient and frustrated. Sylvia, Victoria finally said, her false kindness completely disappearing. Enough is enough. Tell us exactly what you found and where those letters are now. We were back in the living room. Audrey had positioned herself strategically near the door, blocking my exit. The pretense of a family visit had completely vanished. I'm not sure I trust you, I replied, buying time. There's something about all this that doesn't feel right. Victoria approached me, her expression now openly threatening. We're not playing, Sylvia. We know someone contacted you at Abigail's wedding. We know you've been meeting with Thomas Blackwood. Now one last time, what exactly do you know? I pretended surprise and fear. I don't know what you're talking about, Victoria. Who is Thomas Blackwood? Audrey also came closer, discreetly pulling something from her purse. With horror, I realized it was a syringe. This doesn't have to be difficult, Sylvia, she said with a cold smile. We can make it look natural. An elderly woman, living alone, suffers a heart attack. No one will question anything. My hand moved instinctively toward the panic button in my pocket, but it was still too early. If the agents intervened now, the coordinated arrests could be compromised. I don't understand why you're doing this, I said, backing away slowly. You're the wives of my sons, the mothers of my grandchildren. Victoria let out a scornful laugh. Do you really think we married your sons for love? It was a mission, nothing more, a way to access the empire Edward had built. And my grandchildren? I asked, genuinely horrified. Collateral damage, Audrey replied coldly. Useful for maintaining appearances? At that moment Victoria's phone rang. She answered without taking her eyes off me. Her expression suddenly changed to one of alarm. What? Are you sure? She listened a moment longer, and then hung up, looking at Audrey with panic. We have to go? Now. What's happening? Audrey asked, confused. That was Roger. He says there are strange movements around the corporate headquarters. Federal agents, he thinks. And Nathan isn't answering his calls. Panic seized their faces. The operation had begun earlier than planned. What do we do with her? Asked Audrey, pointing at me with the syringe. Victoria looked at me with hatred. There's no time. Let's go now. We'll deal with her later. Both headed hastily toward the door, momentarily forgetting me in their rush to escape. At that instant, there were loud knocks on the front door. Federal police. Open the door. Victoria and Audrey froze. Audrey tried to run toward the back door, but more voices and footsteps were heard from that direction too. They were surrounded. The front door burst open, and several armed agents entered the house. Behind them came Thomas, who ran directly to me. Are you all right, Sylvia? He asked, quickly examining me. I'm fine, I replied, watching as my daughters-in-law were handcuffed and read their rights. Their faces reflected a mixture of shock, rage, and defeat. You? Victoria looked at me with disbelief as she was escorted out. A harmless old woman like you set us up? I smiled slightly. Never underestimate a grandmother with a mission. Thomas gently took my arm. We need to go now. The arrests have begun all over the city, but some people are still free. It's not safe to stay here. Nathan? Abigail? I asked as I quickly gathered the small bag I had prepared. Safe. Nathan kept his word. He's fully cooperating and has put Abigail under protection. Thomas guided me to a car waiting outside with the engine running. Now it's your turn, Sylvia. It's time to reunite with Edward. As the car drove away from what had been my home for decades, I looked back one last time. Several patrol cars were parked in front of it, their lights illuminating the night. One chapter of my life was definitely ending, but another was about to begin. Where is he? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. At a private airfield outside the city. A jet is waiting to take you both far from here. Thomas handed me a small envelope. Your new documents, cash, and everything you'll need to start again. The journey to the airfield seemed to last both an eternity and just an instant. My mind oscillated between shock at all that had happened and the anticipation of seeing Edward after so much time. How would he look now? Would he recognize me? Would I recognize him? When we arrived at the small private airfield, Thomas guided me through a side entrance, avoiding any kind of control or registration. A small white jet was waiting on the runway, its engines already running. He's inside, said Thomas, stopping before reaching the plane's stairs. I'll leave you alone for this moment. My heart was beating so hard I feared it could be heard above the noise of the engines. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step bringing me closer to a past I thought was lost forever. When I entered the cabin, I saw him standing by one of the windows, his back to me. Even though 15 years had passed, I would have recognized that silhouette anywhere in the world. Edward? My voice sounded more tremulous than I intended. He turned slowly, and finally, after so many years, our eyes met. His face had aged, with deep wrinkles around his eyes and mouth. His hair, once black as coal, was now completely white. But his eyes, those amber eyes that always seemed to see straight into my soul, hadn't changed. Sylvia, he said with a broken voice. My Sylvia. We stood motionless for a moment, as if both feared that by moving, the other might vanish. It was like being in a dream, one of those dreams I had had so many times during these 15 years, where Edward returned to me, alive and safe. But this wasn't a dream, it was real. Edward was alive, standing before me, breathing, existing in the same space as me. I took a step toward him, and it was as if a dam had broken. We moved toward each other and embraced with the desperation of those who have been separated for too long. I felt his arms around me, strong and secure as I remembered them. His scent, older but unmistakable, flooded me, bringing with it a torrent of memories. I'm sorry, he whispered in my ear, his voice broken with emotion. I'm so sorry, Sylvia. You're alive, was all I could say, caressing his face with my trembling hands, making sure he was real. You're really alive. We sat together in the comfortable seats of the plane, our hands intertwined as if we feared that by letting go, the other might disappear again. I tried to contact you so many times, said Edward, his eyes never leaving mine. But there was always someone watching. It was always too dangerous. I would have put you at risk, myself at risk, risked the entire operation. I understand, I replied, though the truth was that I was still processing everything. 15 years of mourning, of building a life without him, of accepting his death, all to discover that he had been alive all this time, hiding, watching from afar. What really happened, Edward? Why did you fake your death? Edward took a deep breath, as if gathering strength to relive painful memories. It all began when I discovered irregularities in the company accounts. At first, I thought they were errors, then that it might be some employee stealing, but the more I investigated, the more I realized it was something much bigger, more organized. He told me how he had discovered that his companies were being used to launder drug trafficking money, how following the money trail had led him to names of powerful people, corrupt politicians, bought judges. And then I discovered the worst, he said, his voice breaking. Our sons were involved. Nathan actively, Daniel perhaps without fully understanding what he had gotten himself into. Why didn't you come to me? I asked, the pain of having been excluded from something so important still fresh despite the years. When I discovered the truth, it was already too late. Victoria and Audrey had seen me investigating. I overheard conversations where they planned to take care of me. I knew that if I simply disappeared or went to the authorities, you would be next. The only way to protect you was to make everyone believe I had died, while I gathered enough evidence to bring them all down. The plane began to move down the runway as we talked. Thomas had discreetly boarded and settled in the cockpit area, giving us privacy. Where are we going? I asked, realizing I had no idea what our destination would be. To a place where no one knows us, where we can start again, replied Edward, squeezing my hand. I have a small house on a Caribbean island. I've been preparing it for us, waiting for the day I could bring you there. Did you always know this day would come? I had to believe it, Sylvia. The hope of being with you again was the only thing that kept me going some days. The plane accelerated and took off, lifting us above the city that had been our home all our lives. I looked out the window, seeing the lights receding, knowing I would probably never return. And our sons? Our grandchildren? I asked, a knot forming in my throat. Edward was silent for a moment. Nathan is cooperating. He will face charges, but his collaboration will reduce his sentence. As for Daniel, the prosecutor believes he can prove he wasn't aware of the true nature of the business. He could come out relatively unscathed. And the children? Abigail, Daniel's twins? They're innocent in all this. The prosecutor has promised that arrangements will be made to ensure they're well cared for. And perhaps, someday, when all this has calmed down, we can find a way to see them again. The tears I had been holding back finally flowed freely. So many losses, so much pain, so many lives shattered by greed and ambition. Edward held me as I cried, his own tears mixing with mine. I know, he whispered. I know. When I finally calmed down, I pulled back slightly to look at him. And now what? How do we build a life after all this? One day at a time, he answered. We have a second chance, Sylvia. Something very few people get. It won't be easy, but we're together again. After all we've been through, that's what matters. The plane rose above the clouds, leaving behind the darkness of night, to enter the brilliant light of the full moon illuminating the sky. A new beginning, I thought. A second act in a life I believed was over. I love you, Edward, I said. Words I hadn't spoken in 15 years. I never stopped loving you, not even when I believed I had lost you forever. And I love you, my Sylvia. Every day of these 15 years, every moment we were apart, I carried you with me in my heart. We kissed then, a sweet and salty kiss from the tears, a kiss that closed 15 years of separation, and opened the door to a future I never thought we would have. I didn't know what that future would hold. Our lives had been destroyed and rebuilt too many times. But as the plane flew toward a new dawn, I felt something I thought I had lost long ago: hope. And perhaps, after all we had lived through, hope was the most valuable gift of all.